The Flashy girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.
Hello and welcome back to Oh, Mr. Sheffield. It's a podcast that you've been listening to, hopefully, for multiple seasons now. I am Sean Pasquale here with
Toria Sheffield.
That's right. We host this show where we talk about the Fran Drescher sitcom from the 90s called The Nanny. Mm-hmm. And this week we are talking about season 2, episode 24, Strange Bedfellows.
Mm-hmm.
Which, do you know where that idiom comes from?
Politics makes strange bedfellows.
Yeah, but do you know who
oh no. Wait, let me guess. No.
Shakespeare. He originated the term. The quote is, "Misery equates a man with strange bedfellows." It's from The Tempest.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
My reference to it comes from much later.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah, much later. Politics makes strange bedfellows. That was way later. Then centuries after that, it was used by Edward Lytton, who wrote "Poverty Has Strange Bedfellows." But
where did politics make strange bedfellows?
I don't know. But our man Willie Shakes, he originated it. That guy, man, you can't escape him. The bard, the immortal bard. They were right when they said he's immortal.
I just secretly don't believe it was one man.
No, it probably wasn't. It was probably multiple people.
It makes no sense. It's too good. It's too much. It's too good. Okay. This is the episode where Fran, there's a lot that happens, but the one that most people probably remember is that Fran accidentally crawls into Mr. Sheffield's bed while drunk.
Yes.
But really, this is, the larger theme of this episode is she starts to fear what will happen to her after the children are grown.
Yeah.
So that's what this episode is centered around.
Doesn't this feel like one of those episodes where we don't get to the thing until like the very, very end, and it's more used as like a button as opposed to like, shouldn't this have been of like the second scene in the episode as Fran gets into his bed and then the rest of the episode unpacks all of that?
Yes, but you know what? I understand what you're saying in that, like, you're like, oh, usually like that would be the inciting incident. But I thought that would be a much more boring episode to just explore. It's like, oh no, we slept in a bed together. Did anything happen? And then we talk about that for the next like 20 minutes instead, or I guess 15 minutes. But in this, you're actually exploring a much more interesting sort of emotional beat,
True.
Which is her fear and anxiety about becoming irrelevant as the children grow. So it's like, I'd rather honestly watch an episode about that and then just have a really funny, outrageous moment. If I actually had to choose. But I know, but also I do think that, yes, like there is this instinct here of like, it's like the whole catching him in the shower naked.
Yes.
But we basically in the opening scene established that Fran's going to attend this little picnic in the park to celebrate the retirement of a nanny friend named Mona. And she has a fake cake made for the event, which is from a place apparently called Plaster of Paris. Plasters of Paris.
Plaster of Paris is a real thing.
I had no idea. God, I am so ignorant this week.
Plaster of Paris had it was like a franchise, I believe, because we had one in Florida, and basically it was a place where like you could go and you could pick out like a ceramic thing and then you paint it yourself. And or you could go and get pre-made things, but like we used to have birthday parties there and stuff as a kid, where like everyone would go. Yeah,
we had something like this, but it wasn't called that where I was from. So, but so it's like she has this beautiful cake made that's actually just plaster, and she tells Niles that it's because she's like, you always spend money on a gorgeous cake and you bring it, and then nobody wants it because they're all on diets, and then you can just carry it home like this. She has it under her arm, so she's so pleased with it. And we also in this opening very briefly established that Mr. Sheffield has a cold, which will affect some things later. But it's just a little side note here. But so we then cut to the park where we actually get to see those other nanny friends again that we saw once like a year ago, where we found out that Fran has other nanny friends.
Yeah. I was actually happy that they followed up on that. I was like, oh yeah, we've met these nanny friends before.
Yeah. And so they're in the park, and Mona enters, and I did not recognize this woman. Really?
No, me neither.
A little bit, but I didn't know where I placed her from. You know?
Tyne Daly.
Yes. Well, the audience is like, woo, and, lots of clapping. So it's very clear that, she is a guest star, right?
I wrote in my notes, is this Delta Burke?
But so no, it's Tyne Daly, who is best, or at the time would have been best known for Cagney and Lacey, which is a show I had heard of and knew was about two female detectives, but I didn't honestly know much more than that.
But so people might know her now for Judging Amy.
Judging Amy. I was going to say
Chasing Amy. Yeah, she played James Silent Bob.
Judging Amy, and I think something else too that.
Well, she's done she did the Murphy Brown reboot, but I don't think anyone watched that.
No, but she
pops up and stuff. She's been on Grey's Anatomy and Burn Notice and Modern Family.
And she was nominated for and won a number of Emmys in her time as Cagney and Lacey.
And she was also a big theater person. In the 80s, she did Rose and Gypsy, and so she did Masterclass with Terrence McNally's Masterclass. So she's a theater lady too. She's treaded the boards, if you will.
Okay. Well, so she shows up and she's actually incredibly depressed. And she basically says that, she's after raising a family on Park Avenue for 20 years, she's now getting tossed out and is going to have to move into a dump in Queens, and that she's literally sacrificed the best years of her life to just move on and be forgotten, which echoes some of the things we had heard in the what was the one called where we meet Mr. Sheffield's nanny?
I'm
blanking on it, but we have some of these themes before, Fran, but so she's very depressed, and this obviously disturbs Fran. And Mona goes, "Don't worry, Fran, this won't happen to you because we're nothing alike. You chose to be a nanny. I just kind of fell into it after I was working in a bridal shop in Flushing, Queens, and my boyfriend kicked me out in one of those crushing scenes. And Fran's sort of stop, and then
it does. It did. I love when people talk songs. It's my favorite thing to do is turn songs into dialogue. So I adored this scene.
No. Basically, Fran's please stop, because it's even just become a layer more disturbing. And then that scene ends with the woman seeing the cake and going, "Plaster of Paris? I used to do that all the time too." And Fran literally runs out screaming.
Yep.
And we should say this woman is about, 25 years older than Fran. So it's kind of looking into Fran's future. And the next scene, we're back.
Fran's complaining to Niles. She goes, as long as you can put a tea bag in a cup of water, you've got a career. And he looks so offended.
Yeah. Because she's you've got nothing to worry about. There's nothing to being a butler. We also established that Cece's birthday's coming up, and she desperately wants to know what Mr. Sheffield got her.
Right.
And it's actually funny too, because Fran had brought a little gift to that picnic, and she didn't end up giving it to that woman, Mona. And so she comes back in to the kitchen, or she comes into the kitchen where Niles and Cece are, and she's holding this little wrapped gift. And Cece's just "Oh, Miss Fran, is this for my birthday?" And, Fran's yeah. And Cece takes it and looks at it, and she goes, "To Mona? Who's Mona?" And Fran thinks, and she goes, "It's your Hebrew name." And Cece looks so thrilled and walks out. And I don't know, did you have a Hebrew name?
Yeah.
What's yours?
Shmuel.
What?
Shmuel.
S-H-M. How do you?
S-H-M-U-E-L. Shmuel. Yeah.
Shmuel. It's such a schlubby.
Yeah, it sucks. It's the worst. It's the worst. And you know why? It was because they don't have like an equivalent of Sean. So they were like, you'll be Shmuel. And I was like, oh, good.
But it's like still because it's also like Shmuel is such a schlubby sounding like
Shmuel.
And it rhymes
it sounds like
whale.
It sounds like I'm drunk and vomiting in my own mouth. My name's Shmuel.
But so anyway, so that's the context for that joke.
It's also a character in The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. So
way to make it dark. Thanks. Nobody wanted to go there when we're joking about Jews. One thing that also happens in this scene when Fran is sort of just like bemoaning her eventual fate to Niles, she's like, the reality is as soon as Gracie graduates, I'm history. And then at that point, Gracie comes in, and we haven't seen Gracie in quite a while. She's also hit a bit of a growth spurt. Like she definitely isn't like the little baby girl that we'd seen for a long time. And she's like, Fran, have you seen my math book? And Fran goes, honey, what does it matter really? She's like, enjoy yourself, watch some cartoons. I mean, so what if you're held back? Second grade could be the best 4 years of your life. And then like sort of like, pats her out of the room, which was just very funny. And the next scene, Fran comes down the stairs and she is in this tight yellow sequins gown. It's like very, very over the top glitzy because she's going to Mona's like official retirement party, which was like scheduled for that Saturday night. And it was the one being thrown by her employer at some fancy hotel in Manhattan. And actually we had established in a previous scene that when Mona was really depressed, she was like, I've been working for them for over 20 years. Like, and they're already turning my bedroom into a cedar closet. And she like starts to cry.
The other thing that we established right before she comes down the stairs is that Sheffield is still sick and Niles, he comes downstairs and Niles is like waiting with his medicine and he's like, I'm going to take my medicine now. And then Niles is like staring at him and he's like, what? You don't have to stare at me. I'm going to take it. And then he like hesitates. And then Niles is like, I mixed honey into it, sir. And he's like, oh, thank you. And then he takes it, which I like when they infantilize Mr. Sheffield.
Yes, me too. Such a baby man with Niles.
Yes.
Because he also then gets so huffy and puffy when anybody insinuates that like, he is not a established, stately man.
Yes.
But so we established that he's still taking cold medicine and he also sees Miss Fine in the dress and he's like, oh, you look lovely. And he's like, you know what? Go off and have a wonderful time tonight. And he's like, and you know what? Take the day off tomorrow. You've been doing such a great job. And she's like, oh, thank you, Mr. Sheffield. So that happens. And then there's a knock at the door and Mona appears. Yes. And Mona's in this like equally over the top sequence gown. And she has a drink in her hand and she's already a little tipsy. And she's like, Fran, guess what? I don't have to go back to Queens. And you know why? And Fran goes, because your boss says you don't have to move out because the reason he never remarried after his wife died is because he's secretly been in love with you all these years. And I just wrote, wow, loaded.
Yep.
And then Mona goes, no, I'm moving to Florida to live with my mother. And she's like, yeah, I have to share a bed with my grandma, but she hardly moves. I just have to get used to sleeping on rubber sheets, which is like such a sad, gross joke. It made me so sad.
So sad. Yeah.
And then, Fran literally looks crestfallen because now she's like, oh my God, like not only am I going to be like, kicked out on the street and irrelevant once these kids grow up, but my fate will be to like live with my mother and grandmother in Florida. Yeah. And so then Mona says, come on, my boss gave me the limo for the night and there's a full bar. And Fran's like, oh, I don't drink. I'm such a lightweight. And Mona's like, yeah, I never used to drink either. But just wait till the first time your boss tells you to take the day off because you're doing such a good job. And Fran's like, what? Because that had just happened to her.
Said, yeah.
And then she's like, it's the beginning of the end. It means they don't really need you anymore. Which Fran's like, maybe I'll have one drink.
Yeah.
Cut to, it's nighttime. She literally swings back into the Sheffield mansion on the door because she's so drunk and this
she's hammered.
Great beat of physical comedy. Like she's obviously drunk so much.
She walks upstairs and falls into a plant in the hallway. It's really good.
Lots of great.
She sells it.
And she's so drunk that instead of going into her bedroom, she stumbles into Mr. Sheffield's bedroom. But she's clearly completely unaware that she's in the wrong room. And she's literally like singing to herself. She's like,
she checks her makeup in the mirror, but she's looking at a portrait of Mr. Sheffield's mom. Yes. And she goes, oh, I got to dye my hair.
Yeah, like she's so far gone. And she's like doing this and that. She goes into his closet. It's interesting because she comes out in like a nightgown or a slip. And I was like, maybe she had a slip under the dress and that's what we're supposed to infer. I didn't know how she got into that thing, but oh well.
Yeah, I just assumed she was wearing it under her dress. And
okay.
She just goes in the closet to take her dress off and hang it up. And then she comes out and she's like, oh, I have too many pantsuits.
Yes, that's what she said. And Mr. Sheffield is like completely knocked out because he's been on this cold medicine. So he's just asleep this whole time. And then she crawls into bed and just passes out next to him.
Yeah.
We then have this other great scene where Niles comes in the morning because apparently another one of his duties is to wake Mr. Sheffield up. and he comes into the room and he pulls the curtains open to let sunlight in. And he instantly sees Fran and Mr. Sheffield in bed. And Fran is like, their like bodies are entwined as if they've been like cuddling in the night. They're entangled in sleep.
Yeah.
And he instantly gets this huge smile on his face. He is like so thrilled about this development. And he ends up pulling the curtain closed, kind of quietly tiptoeing out. And then he sees this little bowl of rose petals and he literally like throws it at the bed. Like he is so thrilled. He thinks it's finally happened.
I love that beat, by the way. The throwing the roses was such a good touch.
Yeah, he was so great. And he literally goes down the stairs with like a skip in his step. And Cece walks in and it is now her actual birthday. And when Niles sees her, he lights up even more.
Yeah.
And he's literally like, oh, I was just about to bring Mr. Sheffield his breakfast. And because you know how amazing and happy he feels when someone does that for him. Because he clearly knows that Cece's going to be like, I'll do it, which she of course does. And he's like, oh no, Miss Babcock, like you shouldn't. And she's like, wait. It's because my birthday present's in his bedroom, isn't it? And he's like, oh, you know me too well, Miss Babcock. It's so mean. So she grabs the tray. She runs upstairs, opens the door, turns on the lights, and sees Fran and Mr. Sheffield there in bed. And she literally screams, which jolts Mr. Sheffield awake. And he's like, what are you doing in here, Cece? And she's like, what is she doing here? And like points at Fran. So then like Fran kind of jolts awake. And Niles just starts singing happy birthday, Miss Babcock. Because it's this huge mess.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Mr. Sheffield orders Niles and Cece out of the room. And then it's basically like, Miss Fine, like, I'm sure there's a logical explanation for this, even though like, I can't figure it out now. And he's basically like, what the hell are you doing in here? And she basically explains that like she drank too much the night before. She's really going through something and like assures her, but then he's like, but she assures him that like absolutely nothing happened. And he's like, oh, how can you possibly know that? Like, you were drunk and I was on cold medicine. And she's like, because I happen to know that I always have itchy ears the day after. And she's like, don't you have, any little quirks after something like that? And so they're both clearly dancing around like, did they have sex?
Yeah.
And she's like, no, we didn't. Cause like, I don't have my ears thing. And he's like, well, I guess I always sing. And she's like, what are you sing? And he's like, Georgie girl. And she's like, oh, that's funny. I've been working here almost 2 years and I've never heard you sing. And then she stops realizing that like, he just hasn't had sex in like 2 years. And anyway, she kind of just is like apologizes and leaves. That evening, Mr. Sheffield's in his office with Niles and he, kind of like brings this whole thing up again. And he's like, oh, Niles, the whole thing was so humiliating with Miss Babcock coming in. And he's like, but I have to admit, I have forgotten how nice it was waking up to a bed that smells like perfume. Like it was nice waking up next to a woman. And he's like, I just wish I knew what was bothering Miss Fine.
Right.
And then he goes, oh, wait, I'm talking to Liz Smith.
Who's a famous gossip columnist.
Yeah, she was known as the Grand Dame of Dish. Yeah. And at first, Niles pretends to be resentful, but then he's like, but according to my sources, he's like, Miss Fine is worried about the golden years. And
he goes, oh no, they canceled her favorite show.
Yeah, he says it super earnestly, which it made me laugh because he knows her so well that to him, he does know that would really upset her probably and put her in a funk. And he's like genuinely concerned. And then Niles is like, he literally looks like so exhausted. Like he's always like so many steps ahead of Mr. Sheffield. And he's like, no. Like she's worried about her future with this household. And Mr. Sheffield's like, oh, okay. And he finally gets it. And the next scene is Fran is sitting in the living room trying to figure out a fallback option. And so she's like clearly doing some like random like tracing game on the back of like a cereal box or something. Like, cause she's thinking maybe she could like be an artist. Like she's just super lost right now. At which point the door rings and it's Mona. And she is like glowing and she's like, Fran, I'm not going to Florida. I'm getting married. And Fran's like, oh, to who? And she's like, my boss. And she goes, after last night's party, he asked if he could talk to me back at the house and he gave me this ring. And she goes, and you know how they're turning my room into a cedar closet? It turns out it's for me. And then she goes, for me. And she like dances out. And I don't know about you, but I was genuinely really happy for her in that moment.
Yeah, me too. And and it was like interesting foreshadowing for like where the show is obviously going to eventually go.
Yes.
Which it sounded like, again, when we talked to Peter, it sounded like they always knew that the show, that's where the like logical end of the show would be.
Well, I think they wanted it to end with a wedding. That's how they wanted it to end, But so I think a perfect end for this show, and I'm sure that, they had talked about this ad nauseum, is it's seeming like maybe Fran was going to leave and her time was coming to an end. And like that exact thing would have happened, that he proposed. I think it would have been like amazing. But so Mona leaves and then Mr. Sheffield comes in after having mulled over, what Niles had said to him earlier about what was really bothering Fran. And he's like, Miss Fine, may I talk to you? And he sits her down on the couch and he sits across from her on a little step stool. So he's almost kneeling, even though he's not.
Yeah.
And he takes her hand, at which point.
And he's like, I'm going to always take care of you.
Oh, no. But before he even starts that, Niles comes in literally singing, humming to himself. He puts a bottle of champagne down with glasses, lowers the lights, and then dances out. And, Fran's like, she's like, Mr. Sheffield, like, what is this all about? And he's like, I don't want you to worry about things, when the children are grown. What I'm saying is, that's what he's like, I want to take care of you. And she literally thinks he's about to.
She goes, wait, let me call my mother.
And then she's like, wait, no, I'll fill her in. But she does use her teeth to take off a ring she's already wearing and then spit it on the floor. Which is like, when you think about it, it's so funny and it seems so easy and effortless, but just thinking of that joke, that physical joke is so creative.
Good. Yeah.
And and the idea to write that in a script, but then have the actress pull it off. Yeah. It's like, that's the thing.
Did you watch the Lucy movie, The Being of Ricardos?
I haven't seen it yet.
It's on Amazon. You should watch it. It's fantastic. But man, she really channels Lucille Ball in so many ways. Like her performances, her love of physical comedy, like the way they even wrote the show, like her involvement, like it's really interesting. There was a lot of when I was watching that movie, I was thinking like, oh, there's so many parallels to the way Fran has really run Fran Drescher's her career. So basically he builds all of this up and she's like ready for it. And then he's like, I'm going to buy you a condo. And she's like, excuse me? And he's like, a condominium. He's like, for you to live in when you retire. Like, you'll be taken care of. Like, you never have to worry. And she's like, oh, okay. And then
at first, her first instinct is to be outraged. But then it sinks in for one more second. And she's like, will it have shutters? And would it allow pets? And he's like, whatever would make you happy. And then she's like, totally satisfied.
And then they cut to Niles spying on them, and he just goes, "Oh, this is going to take forever."
Yes. So he's like so disappointed, and he's like, these two idiots are just not getting the obvious.
Yeah.
And so then, they kind of like, it all feels resolved, and they both start going their separate ways. Like she heads down one hallway and he heads sort of down another one. And as they're saying goodnight, Fran starts to itch her ear.
Yes.
And Mr. Sheffield starts singing Georgie Girl to himself.
Yes.
And then realization dawns.
And they're both on like opposite sides of the same wall. She's like looking in a mirror and he's like just like puttering about, but they're like literally on opposite sides of a wall. And then they kind of like both realize, like she hears him, I think, right? And she starts to like peek around the wall, and then he like peeks around the wall, and they both like look at each other, and like she's scratching her ear as she's peeking around the wall, and he's like, "Ugh!" Yeah, and that's what that's the freeze frame.
Yeah. And then I'm just like, that's actually a huge beat to end on. So it's like, did they bone? Like it's never gonna, I think, be addressed.
It's never
again.
Gonna be brought up. But yes, the implication was that at some point in the night, and look, as you pointed out, when we see them in the morning, they're entangled. So it seems like, maybe at some point in the night, he felt a body next to him, and she felt a body next to her, and then they just started like doing stuff.
Nature took its course.
Yeah, I mean.
Who's to say? But I mean,
a lot of questions about consent there.
It's just the thing is, hey, there's no problem if neither of you are consenting.
I don't know if that's how that works.
Cancels each other out. But the thing is, it is when you actually take a step back, it is a huge implication what is kind of just little funny throwaway joke.
Yeah, it really is, and it's interesting that they were like, all right, this is the beat we'll go out on. And they don't really treat it like a huge implication, but it is.
Yeah. Because I guess the reality is both these characters just would probably realistically never speak of it again. So they could just like move on with it.
Or, they're both just really happy. Like they're both, I don't know. Yeah.
They're having a good day. They're having a good day now.
And that's the episode. All right. So segment time. Mm-hmm. Let's do it. And now segments.
So segments.
Yeah, no, I think we should move on to segments.
We can move on to our segments.
And now segments.
Segments with Sean and Toria.
We hit a lot of the best lines, although we didn't when Cece is trying to, right before she takes the food upstairs and catches them in bed, Niles is really like working her up. And he's like, what's up there, Niles? Is my present in the bedroom? And he's like, I wouldn't say. And then she's like, come on, Niles, tell me what Maxwell's getting me for my birthday. I'll give you $50. And he goes, no, but if you tell me your age, I'll tell you. And then she pulls more money out of her purse and she goes 75. And he goes, see, that wasn't so hard to admit.
Yes. Also in like that same scene, she's like, Niles, you're not going to get my goat. And he goes, why? Did you two get engaged? And then I liked the Hebrew name joke. And then I just wrote, I just loved the Fran drunkenly coming into Miss Sheffield's room scene. And I love Niles discovering them in the morning. Yes. It was just great. It was
so great. It was so great. Like, again, another episode with really strong physical comedy beats. Because also her stumbling up the stairs and falling into the plant and checking her lipstick in the picture and thinking it's a mirror. I mean, it was just all good.
Yeah, it was so great. And then for Yiddish, they used
and as we noted like 5 episodes ago when they introduced Mr. Sheffield's bedroom set, and I was like, well, they didn't build that to use that once. So true. So let's hope we get a lot more. Yeah, well,
a lot more situations.
Season 3.
For Yiddish, she says she was schnockered, which was Yiddish for drunk.
Yes. I've heard that word.
Yeah. And it's one of those words where it's like, even if you know nothing about Yiddish, you get what she's saying.
Yeah. Schnockered.
And Shmael, were you schnockered last night? Shmael, how schnockered were you last night?
Not last night, but New Year's Eve night. I got pretty pretty drunk.
You heard it here first. Schmoyle got pretty drunk.
God, at least get it right. Oh my
Schmoyle
God.
got pretty schnockered.
Schmoyle got super schnockered. Say that 3 times fast.
So, and then for Nanny Trivia, I actually got this from one of our really awesome listeners who sometimes sends us really fun facts about the nanny. Her Instagram handle, or their Instagram handle is Le Petite Sparks, and they have worked in production for like 20 years and know some, always great fun fact source. And this is trivia that ties into a slight, like not corrections corner, but ties into something that we talked about a few weeks ago, where you had mentioned that there was a lot of McDonald's references in this one episode, and you had actually looked to see if there was like if Fran Drescher had like been in a McDonald's collab or anything like that, and you couldn't find it. She said that during the nanny's run, Fran Drescher was in commercials for Hanes, Hosiery, Three Musketeers, and Pizza Hut, and there were casual references to those brands throughout the show's run.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So McDonald's it must have been something for somebody.
Yeah, because it was right? In it a lot. Like the jokes were funny. Like it didn't seem like they were just like thrown, like shoehorned in. But
no, but it was mentioned a lot. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Also, Nanny Trivia. This one comes from IMDb, but Mona's last line where she goes, it's all because she reveals that the cedar closet was being built for her, and she goes, "It's for me, for me, for me." That is a nod to Gypsy. That's a line that Mama Rose says in Gypsy, and Tyne Daly played Mama Rose.
I love Gypsy.
Gypsy's a good show.
Yeah, I like Gypsy even as like a younger kid when it really made no sense when there was really no understanding of like. I remember the scene when Rose's like boyfriend is like, "If you put her in this show, I am leaving." And then I was like, what's the big deal? It's just a fun show. Because she's famously putting her daughter in a burlesque show because they're desperate for money. I was like, all these ladies seem really nice. I love the butterfly. But so in terms of the Fran or the Cece, in this episode, I just, on an emotional level, I relate to Cece. And I think I just wrote... I realized I relate to Fran and Cece when they're at their saddest and most neurotic.
Yes.
Like I never relate to it when it's like, Fran winning a kissing contest or like, Cece being rich. But like when they're at their most neurotic.
They're sad and vulnerable.
Yes. I'm like, it sucks to really, really like be in love, like to be like fixated on someone and just be like, oh no, like now they're dating so-and-so. Like, I feel like that was me in my 20s all the time.
I don't know that I related to anyone necessarily in this because I don't really get drunk. Like I've never really gotten blackout drunk, that's not, and I've never so I don't know. I felt like I related to Niles the most.
In that,
I want Fran and Mr. Sheffield.
Yeah, I see. Yeah. Okay. I thought you were going to be like in that you wanted to torture.
I hate Cece.
Yeah.
I also had a blonde woman in my life.
You want to kick me when I'm down. I was going to say, you just like kicking me when I'm down? Is that what?
Yeah, I revel in your misery.
Yes. But yeah, I see.
Yeah, I don't know. That was the closest I could get. As I was like, oh yeah, I also would operate the same way. If I knew two people that were that destined to be together, I think I would also play the Cyrano. The Cyrano. Yeah, the Cyrano. Exactly.
Okay. So
well, that was an episode.
Yeah.
Shorter than last week, but I think we packed a powerful punch into a minimum amount of time.
Yeah. And like we said, so for the listeners, little insider knowledge, we recorded this week's episode and last week's on the same day. So we have just been on I'm trying to find a name for Fran and Mr. Sheffield together. I'm thinking Shran.
Shran. Yeah, that's perfect.
We've been on a Shran high the last couple hours because these have been such strong
episodes. And we've got 2 episodes left in season 2. So it'll be interesting to see if they go, like, these were 2 very strong episodes that felt like, oh, that could have been a great season finale, either one of these. So I'll be interested to see if the final 2 of this season are as strong, or if it was the network was like, hey, you get to do 2 extra episodes this season. And they were like, whoa.
Oh,
yeah, perfect. So yeah, we've got the Chatterbox and Fran gets mugged, which seems like a dour way to end the season, but
I know.
we'll
I'm very
see.
curious if it's gonna
Be like a very special episode.
Yeah, if it's gonna be a very special episode or not.
Yeah, they're like, stay out of the park. All right, well, that's a show.
That's a show.
But before we go, we should say, if you enjoy this show, go to Apple Podcasts and rate and review it. You can also now rate and review on Spotify. So if you listen to it there, drop a rating and a review for us, because it helps more people find the podcast in the future. And if you want to interact with us, go to Instagram or Twitter and look for Mr. Chef Pod with 2 Fs. And tell us what you think about stuff.
Yeah. And I'll say this. We definitely have devoted listeners and we have our little base, but like we're by no means like such a big podcast that like, we don't get really, really helped by reviews and ratings.
Super helpful. It genuinely like really helps people find the show.
We're at that stage where it's like it really makes a huge difference. And also we're at that stage where like we love reading them. It makes us so happy. We're not just, there's not like, you'll go on and you'll realize like, it's not like, it's like, oh man, so many thousands of reviews. It's like, no, we read the ones
every
that we
single
have.
one, and it genuinely brings joy.
Yeah. So,
validation.
So please do, if you're enjoying this, because we enjoy doing it so much. So we will see you guys next week.
Yep. All right. Bye, Toria.
Goodbye, Sean, forever.
The Flushing Girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.